So we were thinking, we were racking our brains at the Student Movement office about how to honor young people who are making a big impact. And we were thinking, well, should we just call it the Global Leadership Award? Should we call it a Leadership Award? And then when we were talking about some of the experiences and some of the things that we've learned along the way, I remembered the opportunities that I've had in South Africa to meet with some leaders in that country. Particularly Rolf Mayer and Cyril Ramaphosa, who I've had the opportunity to interview and work with on occasion. Now, Rolf Mayer was the chief negotiator for the Nationalist Party in South Africa. And Cyril Ramaphosa was the chief negotiator for the ANC in South Africa before the transition from apartheid. And whenever I had the opportunities to speak with them, they always reminded me of one thing. That Ambassador Princeton Lyman, when he was ambassador to South Africa, represented America impeccably and represented the kind of hand that the United States can play around the world. And that is to be an effective mediator. That is to empower the local community to solve their own problems. And that is what led us to name this the Ambassador Princeton Lyman Global Leadership Award. I am privileged to have to be joined by Ambassador Princeton Lyman in the student movement's work. Ambassador Lyman, about a year ago, joined our board of advisors, and I had to ask him if I could use his name, because you can't throw names around like Princeton Lyman. He is, you can't. It's too distinguished. Ambassador Lyman is joining us here tonight, and he will just speak very briefly, before we get into the award, about his experience of connecting two very, very distant dots. The ANC and the Nationalist Party. Today, Rolf Mayer and Cyril Ramaphosa are literally best friends. And that is the product of a very successful negotiation. Ambassador Lyman joins us tonight. He was the ambassador to South Africa and Nigeria, as well as a former Assistant Secretary of State for International Organization Affairs. He is the author of the book Partner to History, which documents that story, that remarkable process which he helped facilitate to bring democracy to South Africa after decades of apartheid rule. Lyman is regarded by senior government officials in both South Africa and the United States as a gifted diplomat and a proud example of what America can offer the world in mediation and foreign policy. Lyman is a member of the SMRC Board of Advisors, as I mentioned before, and currently is an adjunct senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a professor at Georgetown University. We look forward to hearing to Ambassador Lyman. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's really an honor for me to be here and to have this award named for me. It's extraordinary. And my thanks also to Ambassador Lapo and to the South African Embassy for hosting it here at this wonderful place. You know, right after the change in South Africa in 1994, and things changed so dramatically, you could come to this embassy in a whole different way. And I remember the number of South Africans who said to me how nice it is to be able to go inside the embassy instead of demonstrating outside of it. And I want to say something about the significance of what you're all about, and I am so impressed by what you're doing and everything you're engaged in. And let me just go back for a moment in history on the apartheid movement, because it was two elements of American society that made the apartheid issue what became in the 1980s the #1 foreign policy issue being debated in the United States. It was the African American community, for which there was a symbiotic relationship between the civil rights movement and the anti-apartheid movement, and it was the students on university campuses across the country who began disinvestment campaigns and put the issue together, those two organizations, on the agenda in a way that Congress could not ignore, nor could the President ignore. And it's a very important lesson that American foreign policy works best when it's imbued with a moral purpose. We sometimes forget that, and sometimes in government we're tempted to forget it. And it takes the public to come as you are doing, and to remind us what the real purpose of American foreign policy is. I was very privileged to be in South Africa during that extraordinary period of negotiation. The credit goes overwhelmingly to the South Africans. We weren't mediators, I like to say we were facilitators, but it was the South Africans who said it's our country, it's our issue, we have to resolve it. Nelson Mandela, F.W. de Klerk, Rolf Meyer, Cyril Ramaphosa, people of extraordinary skills and dedication who worked through for 3 years during very tense times to pull off one of the great achievements of the 20th century. And we were privileged to be there, and I think to lend every possible support we could to that process. To be facilitators and be credible as taking messages back and forth, encouraging people, but making it clear that we were on the side of ultimately ending the apartheid system. We were not neutral in that regard. And I'm glad we were able to play that role. I'm honored that Cyril and Rolf would say that, but I feel that we were privileged to be part of that process and that very dramatic process. And I want to commend all of you because, as we know now, whether dealing with Darfur, or I hope others of you will also look at other major crises like the Congo, etc., that unless there's a groundswell from the United States, unless there's a groundswell of people who take these issues seriously and force them onto the agenda of the American foreign policy, they often get overlooked. I am so impressed with all that you are doing, and I'm impressed with our award winners tonight for the extraordinary work they're doing, getting people engaged, etc. I tell you, it warms my heart, and I can't tell you how important it is. It is very important. People do listen. They may not listen as much as you would like, but they can't help but listen. I went through my early days in government, the Vietnam War, and all the controversy over that, and then the apartheid issues, and then more recently the genocide in Darfur. And without people like yourselves out there working at it, dedicated to it, giving it your all, reminding us of the moral purpose that must imbue our foreign policy, we wouldn't do it very well. So thank you all very much. Saul, thank you for this honor and for creating the event tonight.